All right, so yesterday Joe Biden gave a speech in Philadelphia where he was pretty aggressively going after MAGA Republicans for being a threat to democracy here in the United States, and there has been a complete and total freakout from conservatives around the country in response to this, basically comparing this speech to something that Adolf Hitler would have given back in Nazi Germany, and losing their goddamn minds, pissing and shitting their pants over the idea that Joe Biden would dare to criticize the same coalition that is still to this day actively trying to overturn the 2020 election and say that they have characteristics of fascism or that they are again a threat to democracy itself. So I'm going to play just a short little 2-minute clip here from his speech because, no reason to get into all of the different various clips. It was pretty much centered around the same message that you're going to see here. And then we're going to get to more of the entertaining aspects in terms of the conservative responses to the speech that he delivered. So let's go ahead and jump into this first one.
But as I stand here tonight, equality and democracy are under assault. We do ourselves no favor to pretend otherwise. So tonight, I've come to this place where it all began to speak as plainly as I can to the nation about the threats we face, about the power we have in our own hands to meet these threats, and about the incredible future that lies in front of us if only we choose it. We must never forget, we the people are the true heirs of the American experiment that began more than 2 centuries ago. We the people have burning inside of each of us the flame of liberty that was lit here at Independence Hall. A flame that lit our way through abolition, the Civil War, suffrage, the Great Depression, world wars, civil rights. That sacred flame still burns. Now in our time, as we build an America that is more prosperous, free, and just. That is the work of my presidency, a mission I believe in with my whole soul. But first, we must be honest with each other and with ourselves. Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Now, I want to be very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans.
Okay, so again, that basically is like a solid synopsis of everything that he was saying in this speech. And notice that he does give some degree of nuance there, right? He's not saying every single person who ever voted for a Republican is inherently evil and that they're a threat to the country. I'm saying that because you're going to see from the conservative responses to that that's basically how they interpreted this message. But I mean, he even says in that short little introduction clip that I'm not talking about all Republicans, right? I've been able to work with some establishment Republicans on very milquetoast, watered down pieces of legislation, like the bipartisan infrastructure framework. If anything, as a leftist, I would be critiquing that from the left and saying that you shouldn't be working with these establishment Republicans because all they're going to do is water down your agenda and you're going to end up with a much more significantly reduced piece of legislation. So there's critiques from the left on that, but like the idea, which you're going to get from conservatives when we get to these responses here, that he was insinuating that every single Republican is a direct threat to the nation, and not only that, but he's going to take like aggressive police or militaristic steps to suppress that threat to the nation internally, is just absolutely blown out of proportion by all of the conservatives who have been responding to this speech. But again, he puts a little bit of nuance in there. He's slamming MAGA Republicans, the people who are, again, to this day, still trying to overturn the 2020 election. So the idea that like it's controversial to say that these people are anti-democratic or that they have characteristics of fascism within their coalitions, or the idea that they are a threat to democracy, none of that should be controversial in any way, shape, shape, or form. Donald Trump just came out within the last week calling for a redo of the 2020 election. Okay, we are in 2022 right now, and he's still trying to rehash the completely valid 2020 election results. Okay, so again, he's coming out here and saying they're a threat to the country because they are actively trying to dismantle whatever semblance of democracy that we have left in this country right now. So it's not even like this is something that happened in the past. This is happening right the fuck now, and still conservatives are freaking out about, you know, the insinuation that they are a threat to democracy. You are literally still trying to overturn the previous election, not to mention the steps that you were taking in regards to preparing to, steal the next election potentially. But here from CNN again on that, they say election deniers are winning political nominations across the country. So this is happening not only within the congressional elections, the Senate elections, the House elections, but also within the state level and within a lot of these election boards across the country, where people, Republicans, right-wing reactionaries who deny the results of the 2020 election are being put in positions to have control over the next election. Okay, so again, the idea that they're not a threat to democracy is completely fucking insane and devoid of any evidence whatsoever that we could see in a moment like this. But now we're going to get to the absolutely amazing conservative responses to this speech that he was giving. So first of all, yeah, if you look at the background behind him, yeah, it's red, it's, somewhat ominous there. You got, two Marines standing behind him, whatever, who gives a fuck? If anything, that's kind of, an indication that he's kind of leaning into the Dark Brandon aspect of his presidency right now. Who gives a fuck? All right, we're talking about the setting of a speech that he was giving, where he was basically giving like a lukewarm critique of what is a intense and serious fascist threat to the United States right now, and this is all that they were focusing on, was the setting behind him. Okay, completely blown out of proportions. But here to start us off, we got Tucker Carlson, the most prominent and successful white nationalist propagandist in the country. They say Tucker Carlson slams horrifying Biden's speech on democracy. It's truly nuts, he said. So they say that Fox News host Tucker Carlson described President Joe Biden's primetime address to the nation as horrifying during his show on Thursday, and said that the president's remarks were immoral. They say the Fox host took issue with the president's speech and compared the red background in Philadelphia to something that might have been used in Nazi Germany. They say while introducing a guest on his show, Carlson said that he found the speech truly horrifying. We made fun of it at the top of the show because we really didn't know how else to respond. But Joe Biden crossed into a very dangerous territory, very dangerous place. Tonight, he declared in a speech in Philadelphia that anyone who disagrees with him is a threat to the country. Okay, hold on. He didn't say that. All right, he said anyone who is actively trying to dismantle democracy, people who are within MAGA coalitions, who are still trying to rehash the 2020 election and who are preparing and laying the groundwork to steal the next election, he's saying those people are a threat to the country, which is 100% a verifiable fact. But all of these conservatives who have been coming out critiquing this speech are trying to portray it as if he was saying anybody who disagrees with me on like my economic policy or my immigration policy or my foreign policy, anybody who disagrees with Joe Biden in any way, shape, or form, that somehow that's who he was talking about. When if you actually go and listen to the speech, no, if anything, he was overly nuanced in his description of the current state of the Republican Party right now. But they continue saying that the president repeatedly said that MAGA Republicans and President Trump threatened democracy in the U.S. and criticized those who still don't accept the outcome of the 2020 election. He also said that not all Republicans are extremists. Carlson showed a clip from the speech where Biden said, too much of what's happening in our country, this is the clip that we just watched, too much of what's happening in the country right now is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. The Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans, and that is a threat to the country. So yes, that is 100% accurate and true. But he said, yeah, they're a threat, says the guy with blood red Nazi background and Marines standing behind him, Carlson said. It's a complete outrage that this is being sanctioned as a White House event. In other words, this is the approved position of our government. It is totally immoral. Okay, so this coming from the same guy who has literally had people on his show, like this guy Jesse Kelly over here, and said that Republicans might need to end up supporting fascist candidates in order to push back against the perceived communist takeover of the country right now. So let's just go ahead and remind ourselves of this clip from a couple months ago.
In the face of this, and at some point people are going to say, why should I follow the rules? Why should I be a good citizen if they don't have to follow the rules? I mean, things kind of break down at some point, don't they?
They will break down. They are breaking down, Tucker. I've said this before, and I'm telling you, I'm worried that I'm right. The right is going to pick a fascist within 10 to 20 years because they're not going to be the only ones on the outs. There's 60, 70 million of us. We're not a tiny minority. And if we're going to be all treated like criminals and all subject to every single law while Antifa, Black Lives Matter guys go free and Hunter Biden goes free, then the right's going to take drastic measures. And it's not about Hunter Biden and his drug use. Nobody cares that guy was bumping booger sugar lines off European hookers on the weekend. It's about justice that he's never held accountable for, and none of the Bidens.
Okay, so there you go. I mean, you have Tucker Carlson, one of the most, if not the single most prominent conservative talk show hosts, a white nationalist and a fascist propagandist, having somebody on his show, Jesse Kelly, and agreeing with him that Republicans might need to nominate openly fascist candidates in order to push back against this perceived, hypocritical stance coming from the Democratic Party, okay? They're openly saying this, all right? So again, the idea that it's controversial to say that they have aspects of fascism within their coalition, if anything, that's an understatement, all right? They are openly saying this shit, okay? This is just Tucker Carlson. We also have motherfuckers like Marjorie Taylor Greene who have come out and openly identified themselves as Christian nationalists, okay? And we could get into the different conversations about what exactly the word fascism means, right? With conservatives freaking out about this speech, and also Joe Biden's recent statements a couple of days ago that I covered on this channel of him saying that they are semi-fascists essentially. But you could go with any definition. Let's take Mussolini, for example, one of the fathers of fascism in the first place, who helped to get it up and running in Italy. He described fascism as the merger of corporate and state power. That would apply 100% to the entirety of the Republican Party, and also many Democrats as well, who are massively corrupt and beholden to the interests of the capitalist class. That could be one definition. You could also point to their scapegoating of immigrants, their scapegoating of the LGBTQ community, their attacks on socialists and Marxists. Those are all key hallmarks and rhetoric that has been used historically by fascists. You could talk about their vehement support for endless militarization and the police state in this country. So many different things that you could talk about, variables and aspects of fascism that directly apply and align with the modern conservative movement that would be 100% accurate to then call them fascists, okay? But even if you didn't want to discuss any of the nuances of the definition of fascism and how different characteristics apply to these motherfuckers, here you have the most prominent propagandist on the right on Fox News, a mainstream channel, who is openly saying, maybe we should start supporting fascists, okay? So again, shouldn't be controversial in any way, shape, or form, but still we had responses like this one from another Fox News host, Greg Gutfeld, who said, once again, the Democrats have a wartime president. The problem is he's declared war, not on drugs or poverty, we are still continuing the drug war, or even pumpkin spice lattes, but on other Americans. You, me, and your parents. We were sold the wrong Joe. We were expecting Biden and got Stalin. Okay? Joe Biden, this milquetoast centrist capitalist, okay, is Joseph Stalin, apparently, according to Greg Gutfeld and the rest of these Fox News ghouls. Okay, we get another one here. This one's absolutely amazing. And again, from Fox News.
Yeah, the imagery there was almost satanic with that blood red lighting and the two Marines behind him. It was just insane.
Okay, so it was satanic. It was like literally satanic. Now, this plays into another, critique of Republicans freaking out about Biden calling them fascists or semi-fascists or whatever the fuck. You're out here saying that his speech was satanic, right? And this comes on top of the fact that all of these conservative propagandists, all of these conservative politicians on a very regular basis call Joe Biden either a fascist or a communist or a dictator or, as part of a global pedophile ring, right? These are the criticisms and the types of rhetoric that we hear from conservatives on a very regular basis. And then when Joe Biden turns around and accurately calls them semi-fascists, okay, then they start freaking out and acting like, oh, this is an attack on half the country. You guys do this on a daily basis, right? This is all that we hear from you guys, that Joe Biden, you just had a Fox News host here comparing him to Stalin. Okay, so you can compare this milquetoast centrist capitalist to Joseph Stalin, but then when he compares you to having characteristics of fascism, then somehow that's crossing a line here. I mean, it's just transparently hypocritical and just absolutely ridiculous, but of course, this is what we would expect from conservatives. They do this on a regular basis. We had this take from Donald Trump Jr. saying, imagine what the media would do if Trump gave that speech about millions of Democrat voters. It really makes you realize how partisan and broken they are when watching them desperately run cover for the arguably the most divisive speech in American history. The most divisive speech in American history. As Aaron Rupar points out here, Trump has had, obviously many divisive speeches and statements in the past, to say the least, but here's just one about Democrats. He says they are vicious, horrible people. They are horrible people, okay? And this doesn't even get into, Donald Trump going on at the Charlottesville rally and saying that there's good people on both sides, right? All of the different times that Donald Trump has had just atrocious statements and speeches where he has been incredibly divisive, probably the most divisive president that we've had in U.S. history, and they're turning around and saying, no, it's actually Joe Biden, somebody who overly focuses on bipartisanship in a moment like this. He's the one who's the most divisive president that we've ever seen, and not only that, but maybe even the most divisive political leader in history, as you're going to see from some more of these conservative takes here. But now I want to hear a little bit from Ben Shabibo, the intellectual giant of the right. Let's go ahead and jump into his take on this very mild and middle of the road speech that he was giving there, where he was just attacking the people who are actively trying to overthrow democracy right now.
If he works with you, and if you work with him, then this means you are no longer, you don't have to worry about him labeling you the enemy. But if you don't work with him, that is a very different story. If you do not work with Joe Biden, well, then he is going to unleash the power of his administration against you. And you should be ready, because you are a threat to the republic. You, the person who doesn't like his agenda. You, the person who says, hey, yeah, you know what? I'll say that you won the election in 2020. Sure. But I think you're a horrible president. You're doing a terrible job, and you should never win another election again. And you're a demagogue who is using the patina of unity in order to purge your political opponents from the public square. You're the enemy. That's what this speech was all about. Him trying to buy that back a little bit by pretending that he's not speaking about all Republicans. You're right. He's not speaking about all Republicans. There are people at the Lincoln Project he's not speaking about. There are some people who used to be Republicans and no longer consider themselves such. The Ana Navarros of the world. He's not talking about you. But if you are a conservative who opposes his agenda, he is talking about you.
Okay, so again, straight up wrong. I mean, he was very nuanced, again, if anything, overly nuanced in the speech that he was giving there, that he was not talking about everybody. And again, he's trying to push this idea that Biden was saying that anybody who disagrees with any of his policies is a threat to the nation. No, he made it pretty clear there, Ben. I mean, he was saying anybody who is still trying to overturn the 2020 election, anybody who is being installed in these positions as election deniers and preparing to try to steal the 2024 election as well, he's saying those people are a threat to democracy. Okay, not the people who just happen to have economic policy disagreements with him or disagreements on other aspects of his agenda. That's just completely misinformation right there, right? It's the opposite of the point of what Joe Biden was actually saying in his speech. We got another take here from Dave Portnoy. He says, every time I think Biden and crew can't be dumber, they outdo themselves. Seriously, who gives a speech warning people about how dangerous Republicans are to democracy while having a background that looks like the Soviet Union and Hitler had a baby? The Soviet Union and Hitler had a baby. It's a red background, okay? It's literally the color red, all right? And I don't know if these motherfuckers forgot about this, but red is kind of like the whole color of the modern GOP, right? That's like the color of your political party. You have MAGA Republicans who are running around with red hats on that say, make America great again. This is like your color, and you're coming out here and saying that, oh, because he had a red background, that it looks like it was a combination of if the Soviet Union and Hitler had a baby. I mean, what the fuck are these people even talking about? It's absolutely insane. This one was obviously the most deranged take. I saved it for last here from conservatives, but obviously he deleted this tweet for obvious reasons here. But here from Nick Adams, he says, I don't think Hitler ever said anything about the Jews that was as straightforwardly evil as Biden said about me as a Trump supporter last night. Lie after lie after lie, encouragement to make other people fear me, and we know what fear does to groups. Disgusting. So literally saying that Adolf Hitler was less divisive or was less aggressive in targeting Jewish people than Joe Biden was last night in his speech in targeting people who are actively trying to overthrow democracy in the United States. Okay, so they're absolutely fucking out of their minds, pissing and shitting their pants, coming up with the most deranged takes that you could possibly imagine in response to something that was, again, some people on the Democratic side, even some leftists, are coming out and saying this is his best speech that he's ever given. I honestly think that it was just kind of like lukewarm. It was like, okay, I mean, I'm glad that he's going on the offensive against these people. That's great, commendable, sure, whatever. But the idea that this was some huge dramatic speech where he was waging war against half the country, and not only was he equivalent to Joseph Stalin or Adolf Hitler or something like that, but he was even even worse, right? His treatment of MAGA Republicans last night in that speech that he gave was worse than anything that Adolf Hitler said about the Jews. I mean, what the fuck is going on? These people's brains have just been absolutely broken over the last couple of years. And honestly, this is also kind of proving the point that Biden was trying to make there, that these people are deranged and that they're a threat to the country, right? If you're taking what his speech was actually saying there and portraying him as Adolf Hitler or worse than Adolf Hitler, then, I don't know what to say anymore. You're just a part of a fucking deranged cult at this point. But it wasn't even just Republicans. We also had some liberals out here, including CNN reporters like Brianna Kalar, saying, whatever you think of this speech, the military is supposed to be apolitical. Okay, you can see my response down here. The military is apolitical? That's absolutely news to me. The military has, as far as I know, always been an inherently political institution. They're basically the violent force that, acts on behalf of the capitalist class here and acts on behalf of U.S. foreign policy interests around the world. They are inherently a very political force. They are a violent political force at that. So the idea that, the military is apolitical should be just at face value to anybody who understands the nature of the military, considered to be completely ridiculous. But she says positioning Marines in uniform behind President Biden for a political speech flies in the face of that. It's wrong when Democrats do it, and it's wrong when Republicans do it. Who gives a fuck? I mean, seriously, who gives a flying fuck about what the background of this speech looked like? I mean, again, sure, it looked a little bit ominous, but who cares? I mean, is this really what you're trying to hang your hat on about, when he was just giving a speech describing how there are still people right now to this day trying to rehash the 2020 election, putting people in positions to potentially gear up to steal the 2024 election, talking about the direct threat of fascism here in the United States, and you have CNN reporters coming out here and hand-wringing about the fact that his background looked kind of ominous. I mean, what the fuck is going on in these people's brains? But of course, then she turned around and went on her show and says Biden faces criticism over Marines and backdrop. Faces criticism? You're the one who just perpetuated that criticism. It was you and other mainstream liberal reporters who were waging that criticism. And then you're going to turn around and say, oh, people are talking about this as a criticism. Just completely fucking ridiculous. I mean, this is, fine journalism going on here from CNN. Just absolutely amazing. But she wasn't the only CNN reporter. We had this guy as well, Jeff Zeleny, saying basically essentially the same thing there. But just as a perspective here in terms of how normal this actually is to have Marines or other troops behind you when you're giving political speeches. This is something that literally every single modern president has done. Okay. And this is, apologies. This is from the podcast Mueller, she wrote. Absolutely atrocious. Don't recommend going to go listen to that. But they did put together a thread here of the times when different politicians, presidents have had military people and personnel behind them in speeches. You got Ronald Reagan, you got George H.W. Bush, you have George Bush Jr. here, you have Bill Clinton, you have Obama, you have JFK, you have Richard Nixon, you have Donald Trump, of course. So listen, the idea that there's something controversial about the background that he had, I mean, get the fuck over it. What are people talking about right now? The fact that that is what some people, journalists, right, people who work for mainstream outlets, that's what they're focusing on right now is completely insane to me. Okay, so that part aside, the other parts of the speech, again, I think it was decent that he's going on the offense against these people. They are, accurately could be portrayed as fascists. They could be portrayed as a direct threat to democracy. I don't see how that's controversial in any way, shape, or form. But then you have conservatives coming out here and absolutely losing their goddamn minds, pissing and shitting their pants over the idea that Biden would accurately call them fascists or that he would accurately label them as a threat to democracy. And not only saying that he was going on an attack against, what probably realistically makes up 30% of the country with Trump's hardcore base of support that he has right now. You're talking about a tiny fraction of the country, and even within that, you're not even talking about every single Republican who happened to vote for Donald Trump. You're talking about the people who are in positions of power, right? You're talking about the fact that Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas, a Supreme Court justice, was working behind the scenes to overturn the election. You're talking about the fact that Republican senators, that people within these various state legislatures, that they were all working in coordination to try to dismantle democracy. And obviously you have Donald Trump heading off that mission. So that's who he was actually talking about in this speech, and labeling them as a threat to democracy is 100% fair and accurate. And if anything, in that speech, he was being a little bit too kind to the broader Republican Party by saying that there's anything commendable to be working with, with more establishment Republicans who have completely enabled the entire Trump base and the entire Trump agenda while he was in office. So, again, you have all of these conservatives coming out here trying to conflate a lot of these words. All of these motherfuckers who are freaking out that Joe Biden called them semi-fascists. They have literally themselves called him a fascist in the past. They've called him a communist. They've called him a dictator. They're comparing him to Hitler. They're comparing him to Stalin. So, at the end of the day, kind of one of the points of this that conservatives are doing this right now is to try to muddy the water and try to make a lot of these terms basically meaningless in the eyes of average Americans, so that when people are accurately describing them as fascists, that people don't really know what those characteristics actually entail or know what those words actually mean in a historical context or in a modern context within the United States right now. So that's part of their agenda in trying to muddy the waters right now and pretending as if it's Joe Biden who's the fascist threat to the country. And, all of this is just in service of perpetuating the points that Joe Biden was actually making there, that, yeah, Donald Trump has such a firm grip on the Republican Party, has such a firm grip on the Republican base, that they are going to go out to bat for him no matter what, even as Donald Trump is still calling for an election redo of the 2020 election and still coming out and saying that he has a right to be the president right now.